All right, welcome to the Tenable and Refactor webinar, where we'll go over adding Tenableio scans to Refactor pipelines. So the agenda for today is we'll do an intro to Refactor and what we're up to at Refactor. We'll also go over Tenableio and vulnerability scanning and how that can be utilized in the Refactor platform, review enhanced vulnerability scanning with automation, and then wrap it up with a demo. So I'm Mike Fraser, CEO of Refactor. I've been at Refactor for 4 years now, ex-Air Force, been in cybersecurity, cloud, and DevSecOps for almost 20 years now. And we also have Mark Webhooks here as well, if you want to introduce yourself, Mark.
Sure. I work at Tenable on the audits and compliance team. There we create the plugins as well as the audit content that gets used in our products. Some of that is based on CIS and DISA content as well as original content that we create ourselves. A little bit of background about myself, been in the security industry or IT industry for about 20 years. Started off system administration, then worked my way in as a security analyst, and now here I am.
Glad to have you here, Mark. We're going to talk about some cool things here today. All right, so from a Refactor standpoint, what we've built is a DevSecOps automation platform, really to bridge the gap between DevOps and cybersecurity. We have a visual builder built in where you can visually build pipelines around various cybersecurity use cases. We also have a DSL or a shared language with an execution environment as well, with sandbox runners for both on-premise and in the cloud. We support a lot of different DevOps and security tools, including Syscat, and also supporting vendors like Tenable building pipelines around their products like Tenableio. We can also be integrated into other third-party platforms as well. We have a very robust SDK to tie into existing investments in CI/CD or other ways to tie us into our CLI, our API, and also our incoming webhook system. So we pretty much interoperable between any other system out there. And then the key to all this is the ability to create and share content between teams. Every team has different users on the spectrum of technical talents, whether you're a developer and are building stuff within the tools, or you're consuming the pipelines that are packaged up in a low code format. It's really nice to be able to collaborate and utilize the automation that gets created there. And then we also have a solution catalog feature now where you can actually create the pipelines and publish them out to a catalog as well, which really ups the game on not just collaboration, but a broader set of technical talent to be able to use and consume the automation that gets created. The other key thing about our platform is we're a hybrid platform. We work both on-premise and in the cloud. So you can use our runner technology, which is the execution environment, with all the tools that you love to use currently around different DevOps tools like Terraform, Ansible, and other security tools like Syscat Lite and Pro, HashiCorp Vault, and other tools as well integrated in. And then those can be used against on-premise environments around, network equipment, on-premise servers, desktops, pretty much anything on-premise that you can use, and then also the cloud runners that you can utilize in your own cloud account, or you can use our cloud-hosted runners as well. And again, we tie nicely into existing CI/CD platforms through our robust SDK, so both the DevOps and cybersecurity teams can build and utilize the automation that they create on either team, and then be able to work together as they're building out more robust solutions.
So Tenableio is a cloud console for managing vulnerability data. It discovers assets through a combination of active scanning, agents, passive monitoring, cloud connectors, and CMDB integrations. Once those assets are discovered, they're tested against a database of more than 63,000 vulnerabilities. And then depending on those assessments, the vulnerability data, threat intelligence, and data science, create easy to understand risk scores that help you prioritize which vulnerabilities need to be addressed first. There's also specialized products under that suite as well, such as our container security and web application scanning products. Okay, next slide. So vulnerability scanning today. When you set up scans, in a lot of cases, you're either setting up a schedule where it happens once a week, once a month, whatever interval you set, or else you're running these scans manually after some sort of event. There's a little bit that happens on its own with some of the passive sensors where it'll discover and do some assessments, but for the most part, it's either the scheduled or on demand. Okay, next slide. So here's kind of a little primitive sample of how we can enhance this vulnerability data. So you take an example of you're building an application stack, you do your configuration to it. Now, before you actually deploy it out and make it live, you can tie in Tenable.io. Through our vulnerability scanning, you can scan for vulnerabilities. With our compliance auditing, you can define policies where you say certain configurations must exist on a system. And then that way you can have that pipeline fail if there's high vulnerabilities or critical vulnerabilities or your system's misconfigured before it actually makes it out to the door and into production. Okay, next.
It's good to present also, how these pipelines get packaged up too. So you can actually build a pipeline inside of the Refactr platform around Tenableio. You can build different pipelines depending on how you want to structure things too. So it makes it really nice to have building blocks that you can utilize, kind of like Lego bricks inside of your pipelining process to make it super easy to add Tenableio scans into that process, and then be able to create and configure them how you want to, because customization is key here. It's nice to have a starting point, but every enterprise and government customer out there wants to be able to make these their own too, and so you have the full power of being able to do that, which Mark will demo to you as well.
Absolutely. All right.
All right, so I will stop my sharing and let you share, Mark.
Okay, you see my screen there?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just going to start off in Tenable.io here. So one of the first things I'm going to do is just come in and create a scan template. So in this case, we're going to do an advanced network scan. This way we'll be scanning for vulnerabilities. And then as well, I'll add in some compliance scanning. So target, I just set it as localhost for right now because this is just a template. When it actually runs within the pipeline, it'll pass in the host of the target or the IP of the targets. So for scanner, to keep it as lightweight as possible, I'm just leveraging our cloud scanners that are available within Tenable.io. For those to work, you do need the targets need to have public IP addresses, which in this case we're doing. And with that, within the security groups for EC2, I set up the Tenable scanner IP ranges. I'll provide a link to that later on so we can, just so you can look those up if you need them for your environment. Okay, so I've got the basics set up there. Now credentials, I'm gonna set up my AWS key pair that gets assigned to that server when it's created. This will allow Nessus to log on, actually figure out what patches are missing, that kind of stuff as well. And then it'll be used for the compliance scan. So I'm going to add a compliance audit here. In this case, I'm just going to add a really simplistic custom. So demo We will save this. So that demo audit is basically a single check. It's making sure that SSH root login is disabled. So within SSH config, permit root login is set to no. Okay. So now that we have that set up, we've called it demo. We'll go into Refactr here. Basically a blank project. I ran the scan earlier just in case something happened with the demo. I've got an offline copy of it. But other than that, it's a blank project. I've also set up my credentials. So I've got my AWS keys and then my Tenableio access and secret key. You can generate those by going into your account within Tenableio, and then you just go to settings, my account, and then API keys, and you just generate a new set here.
Nice, yeah, and you can build those credentials in here to be easy, like Mark's doing with this demo, and then eventually if you want to use external key bolting or other things, you can tie in that way as well. But this makes it super easy to get started, so you can just create a credential and then use that credential in the pipelining process.
Yeah, exactly. And another benefit is your credentials are securely handled this way. You're not embedding them in scripts or anything like that. So once we've got that done, we're going to go back into the pipeline here. And we're going to create a new pipeline. We're just going to call this one demo. And I've got a demo pipeline template created here. I'll provide the link to it as well later on. So if we just grab this, we go into the editor and we'll save it. So here we've got a fairly simplistic pipeline, but what it's doing is it's installing the AWS CLI, builds an EC2 server, installs PyTenable, which is a library used to help with the Python script to simplify it. It does the scan, and then depending on the scan results, it'll, in this step, it's just a debug message, but this is where you would actually deploy out or whatever next steps you wanted to do afterwards. All right, so now I'm just going to save this and we will trigger it here. So I have some variables, and essentially what these do is override the type of either vulnerabilities or compliance status that comes back. So we want to ignore past results. That way, if there's like a warning or a failed, this build will fail, but past it'll ignore. And then for vulnerabilities, we want to ignore anything medium and lower. You can just take the values out if you want to, if you're concerned, or if you don't want to deploy, if there's a medium, you would just take that out. Now here, we're going with the scan name that we created within Tenableio. So in this case, it was just demo. So if we run this, we're just going to wait for the output here. So it started. Each step has its own output, or you can view it all together. So next step.
While this is running, the other cool thing, just a sneak peek, is we have an AWS CLI step module coming as well. So you'll be able to use that with the install, the CLI as well, which will integrate with our credential system. So make it even easier. But yeah, you can absolutely use it how you're building this pipeline out now currently too, which is super easy to leverage once you have the AWS CLI installed.
So now if we look at our output, okay, we see our AWS CLI install completed, our build stack completed. The package was already installed, so it's already satisfied. So now it's just running the Tenableio scan. Now this one will take a few minutes. If we go into AWS now, we'll see that there should be an instance created here. It's running. We've got an address. This address is what gets passed into the scan at creation time. Look in here. So our build stack, again, pretty simplistic for the demo purpose, but we're launching one instance and the AMI is a Ubuntu 20. We pass in what key name we want to use, what security groups, and then we sleep a little bit, wait for the instance to be started up. Once it's started up, we get the address, pipe that address out to the targets file, which will get later or used later on with Tenableio. One thing with this logic, some of these tasks could be done in parallel, but just for the demo purpose so that it showed up in sequential order, I made it all sequential. So now the Tenableio scan, in this case, it's just a Python script embedded within this step. Really what it's doing is it uses the PyTenable library. So based on the scan name, it gets the ID and then launches the scan, waits for it to complete. And then once it's complete, it analyzes the results and either gives it to pass or fail.
The nice thing in the arguments too, you're passing in the credentials that you have stored in this project, so they can get passed in at runtime and then used in the script. And that's a nice feature pretty much in every step. So this is overridden into expression mode, and then you can pass in additional arguments here if you're using other steps too. So it makes it super easy to reuse the credentials or anything else. If you build a variable in here, you can do that as well there, or anything our expression engine supports.
Yeah. And then also we do have revision history for the specific pipelines. So now we'll actually jump into Tenableio. Let's just see where we're at with the scan here. So it's still running. Okay, we'll just give that a couple more moments here.
Yeah, the other key thing while that's running too is, I would say, is the ability to tie in multiple steps together. So you may want to build some of these into individual. So for this demo, everything's here as step modules here in this pipeline. You could package up each of these as individual pipelines too. So if you wanted to have the build stack as one, with the deploy stack, you could have the Tenableio scan as its own individual pipeline too. And so you can build this as modular as you want, but this is, I always recommend building from step modules first, prove it out. Once that's done, you can package this up into building blocks that can be used, reused, and then you can figure out what you want to decouple from here too, because you may, have a build stack that you use for different things as well. You may also have various things that you want to, build in as additional inputs to, say, the Tenableio scan too. So you can build it as sophisticated or as simple as you want when it comes to any of these pipelines.
Yeah, and within the tool here, there's tons of options for templates that are already existing. It's a nice tool to work with. And then as well, for those one-off cases, you've got a lot of flexibility with shell scripts, Python scripts. You can pretty much, you name it, you can run it within the tool.
That's a good point too. Yeah, you can get as low level as you want all the way down to the scripting languages, or you can, figure out if you want to use other tools like Ansible or others as well. So there's all kinds of options as well. But again, to your point, Mark, start simple and start with what you have, or if you have stuff to build from, it makes it a lot easier just to pop it right in here and start building out your pipelines.
Okay, so it looks like we're starting to get some results back here. So we see there's some high vulnerabilities, some medium vulnerabilities. We've got one audit result. So we look at this one, we see it failed. So we were expecting permit root login equals no, but instead we found this value. So now we'll just wait for the scan to finish up and then push the results back to Refactr. So a little bit more about the environment while we're waiting. If we go back to the slide here. So right now, I'm kind of doing a hybrid. So we're using a self-hosted runner and then reaching out to the AWS environment. And then we're also using just the Tenableio cloud scanners. So it's, for this demo, there's really not a lot of moving pieces within it. It should be easy for someone to get up or get started and get using if they want to.
That brings up a good point too. So you could, configuration wise, you can have your runner like Mark has here set up with the self-hosted. It can be deployed in your AWS VPC2, or you can use the cloud hosted. So you have a bunch of options available on where you want it to execute from and how you want it to run with the different moving parts.
Okay, so we see our results came back and the Tenableio scan step failed. So we can expand out, sorry, wrong step here. We can expand out. Okay, we see a bunch of those plugin results. Those will match up to the same things within Tenableio. And then we start to see some red ones. So these are the vulnerabilities that we're not ignoring based on those two parameters that we passed in. So these would be the high vulnerabilities at this point. So we see exactly why it failed. And then there should be one, yeah, here for the compliance result. Again, because that one failed, that's also blocking this from proceeding any further with next steps in the pipeline. Okay, so that was pretty much what I had for a demo here.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mark. The other thing I would say here too is, so once you have your scan completed, you'll want to also look at, all right, what am I going to do with those results as well? And so again, it's all about how you're building out your pipelines and decoupling pipelines that you could use as well. So an example with this pipeline is we could take the results from that scan, create outputs in the pipeline and have those as inputs to another pipeline, which could be for remediation, or you're trying to tie into maybe a ticketing system. So you want to have all of that data popped in, or Slack, or, so it's really about, continuing to evolve the pipelines that you create, but being able to leverage the Tenableio pipeline steps here, which will be, can be packaged up into a repeatable pipeline, and then having those as outputs there. So if you go back to the pipeline, Mark,
Sure.
and click on variables. So here, so that's where Mark has the input variables into this pipeline. You can also explicitly create outputs here too. And so the nice thing about that is, if you have the results and you want them available, you just add the key value pair there, and you can pull the data out. So if you wanted to have, scan, Tenable scan, underscore scan, and the values would be, steps dot the ID of the scan, and then it would be dot result dot, and then whatever the value is. So there we'd have like standard out or others available, and every step has different data available on it that you can have here. So you can explicitly create your outputs here. So that way in the next step that you would use this in, if you're building a bigger pipeline, you could actually just pull the output out, and it would just be steps.id.result.outputs, the key name, and then you pull that out. So it makes it super easy to pull that data out in a subsequent pipeline, because you may have, again, remediation. You may want to drop that into another step that has data around popping it into Slack and so on as well. And so you can do that if you build a top level pipeline. You can also, if you go, so you can close this, Mark. If you go to the catalogs, you can also add in catalog pipelines too. And so the nice thing here is if you go to notification integrations, say I just wanted to reuse like a send Slack message, you could pop that in here and then have that as an additional step. Yeah, exactly. So if I wanted to have that available in here, and then this is all pre-configured. So all of the variables are pre-configured to make it super easy to pop them in, any of the data in here. So whether it's your webhook token or your message information, and then that will become a message in your Slack channel that you can have available in there as well. And this is all configurable as well, so that way you have the ability to reuse. So that kind of brings up the next point here, which is where we're kind of going with Tenableio scans, and how we'll be able to make it even easier to use this as well. So if you want to bring up the slides, or I can.
Sure, I'll bring them up here.
Okay. Yep. So on the solution catalog side, so we're working with Tenable as well to create and package up the Tenableio pipelines, and there could be additional catalogs as well that can be utilized with pre-packaged pipelines in them. So the stuff that Mark's working on here can be packaged up into solution pipelines that then can be used, just like Mark showed the example of Slack. We'll have the ability to also add in Tenableio pipelines into your pipelining process, all from a published catalog as well. And so that way there's a bunch of different pre-built pipelines that make it super easy to get in and start using it. And the goal is, you always want to customize it for whatever you're using it for specifically, because there's a lot of stuff that can be configured on the Tenableio side, and then also how you're creating those pipelines in the Refactr platform. So again, as sophisticated as you want to get, or as simple as you want out of the gate, but you can have the building blocks to start from, so that they're available from a catalog standpoint, which is going to make it super easy to consume Tenableio and other products that we'll have published out with solution pipelines here in our platform.
Okay.
So if you want to, yeah, I kind of skipped ahead, but I figured it was probably a good place to segue into the solution catalog.
Exactly. So a couple other additional use cases, or a few. First one here is just leveraging container security. So you've got an application that has some containers as part of it. You can tie it into our container security product, look for vulnerabilities within those containers, malware policy violations, similar to our example that we showed. Another one here is web application scanning. So you're going to deploy a new version of an application, run a scan against it, make sure the high vulnerabilities, or make sure you're okay with any vulnerabilities that are detected with it before you publish it out the door. And okay. So I guess on to questions.
Do we have any questions from our attendees? Or maybe you did such a good job, Mark, you answered all the questions and there's no questions to be asked. All right, well, while we're waiting, we'll spend a few more minutes on the the pipelining process, yeah, in our bag. So yeah, if you want to contact us as well, both Mark and myself can be, you can contact us both at our email addresses. I'm also on pretty much all social media under IT as Code. So you'll see me on LinkedIn or other social media, even Clubhouse, although I'm on it less because it takes a lot of effort and time to try to keep up with all the people talking on Clubhouse, and sometimes I'll speak as well.
I'm just looking. Give me 1 second here. Yeah, one other thing here. So resources, the files that I used within the webinar, those are available at the first link here. We have public GitHub repo at Tenable, so that's where things like PyTenable will be. We've got some scripts for generating audit content and dealing with that. We've got the documentation pages for PyTenable. This one's the link for the cloud scanners and what their public IP ranges are. I guess one thing we didn't touch on, Mike, was your API and CLI. So
yeah, if you want to pull it up. Yeah, so we have a Swagger spec, or I guess Open API 3 spec for our API. And so you can build directly against our API, which we have customers doing, and it's a very full-featured API. We have a ton of endpoints across the entire platform. We built an API first to ensure that we had the max amount of coverage, and then with that, yeah, so pretty much you can, trigger jobs, create projects. I mean, the whole 9 yards. Everything's in here that you want to be able to use through our API. And every new feature that we come out with, we have usually API endpoints that come along with it, which is great. And then the other piece I think that's important too is we have the CLI. So if you want to pull that up as well, so you can leverage our CLI as well, which will let you, run our CLI against the API, but you can authenticate and set everything up from a CLI perspective. So if you want to use it on your local machine, or you have some other system that you want to tie us into to make it easier to leverage our API with some other logic built in, we have that as well. And you can go look it up under our GitHub Refactr account. And then as Mark showed, he's got a link in here too that we'll provide after the webinar. So if you want to go check it out. And Mark was nice enough to create the GitHub repo too with some of the content he created here for this webinar. So you can actually get started with that content and use it, aside from having to set up a few credentials yourself, and then you'll need access to Tenableio, so you can tie into that. But it's a good way to get started from that perspective. The other thing I would say we can touch on as we're wrapping up here too is we have other ways to also trigger as well. So does Tenableio support outgoing webhooks, Mark?
that I'm not sure of offhand.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious on that. So we have the incoming webhook system in our system too. So anything that supports webhooks to make it even easier, right? So we have the API. The next step there is to make it easier with the CLI, and the next step from there is you can use our incoming webhook system as well. So if systems support webhooks, you can trigger us off of webhooks too, and you just generate those as a job in our platform, and you'll be able to create an incoming webhook job as well. So anyway, the point there is that it makes it easy, no matter how you want to tie into the Refactr platform, and then also how you're going to tie in on the Tenableio side. The other thing you mentioned too, which was the different step modules. So So we support, HTTP requests in here as a step module. We have Ansible. We have other ways as well. So if you have other content you may have created already with Tenableio, you can also use that too. So it's just, a very easy way to leverage what you've already created. And then you just figure out how you want to trigger it, whether you want to do it off of a manual trigger, or you set up a schedule or incoming webhooks. And then the jobs can be triggered from the CLI as well. So you pretty much have full reign over how you want to trigger the jobs in our platform. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, Mark.
No, I'm good actually.
All right, well, perfect. Well, I think we can, if there's no more questions out there, we can go ahead and wrap up. But again, if you have questions and you want to reach out to us directly, go to our email addresses that we have. We'll send out an email follow-up with all of the links and probably a copy of this this slide deck, so you have access to that as well, and this recording, so you have the ability to rewatch it if you want to as well, and then you can actually play around with the different resources that Mark has published out there. And then we will have a solution catalog with Tenable coming very soon too, so you'll be able to get access to that as well. But if you want access to some of this sooner, we can drop it into your refactor project. Just have to request that from us, and we can absolutely do that for you as well. So we're here to help, and really appreciate you attending today, and we will follow up via email to make sure you get all of this information. So if you want to rewatch or test this stuff out yourself, you can. Thank you so much for attending. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.